Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Factorio Bob's Angels, episode 17. The objective for this episode is going to be getting bots running. There's a few things we need to address first, but I start off by getting a few various resources. But you can see on the iron belt there that there's virtually no iron. It's a very small trickle coming through, so that's quite a problem. The Jabot processing is running, but yeah, it's nowhere near enough. That's something I really need to sort out, which means pushing up to the south right up north. So that's potentially going to be in the next couple of episodes, maybe the next one, I don't know. There's probably not even enough resources in the base for me to even do that. So, but we start off with the getting the lube ready. Lots of lube for electronic engines. We need those to create bots. But we also look at getting advanced oil processing researched because the oils stopped processing due to the heavy oils being full. The lube will make a little bit, but take up a little bit, but it's not enough to get that running. But we get that researching as soon as alloy processing is finished. We need alloy processing for the electronic metal mixing furnace. I don't really want to do it in the coal fueled ones, so we get everything set up for the zinc plates to be produced for brass plates. I don't usually bus brass plates, but I think I'm going to, just for the hell of it. I don't know why I don't. I guess you don't really use that much brass. It's used in some levels of stuff, but I don't know. But I'm going to bus it, why not? So we get the zinc in for the zinc production. We'll then pass that on to the brass production. And we've just finished the alloy processing so we can produce the metal mixing furnaces. And we also need copper for this. So I don't think I go and hook up the copper yet. I go and just sort out my inventory because it's a bit full. I've not been that prepared this episode. I've just sort of jumped straight into it. So we come down. Oh, I think that was actually to get some landfill as well. Yeah, that was to primarily actually get landfill and get rid of a few bits and bobs. So we lay out the metal mixing furnace. So there's two inputs above, and the output will come below it. So it doesn't have to pass over its own input. But I guess the way the bus is laid out, it doesn't really matter which way around it is. That's what's nice about this design. It's quite versatile. Yeah, it does take up a lot of space, but it's nice and easy. If you follow a certain set of methods, everything sort of fits in quite nicely. So we get that laid out. I sort of think, have I hooked up the copper correctly? Because it doesn't come down for ages. I'll even go up and have a look in a minute. But we get the inserters laid out for it. Brass is pretty easy. It is going to be using some sulfuric acid, which is quite valuable in these early stages. I think towards the end of my last gameplay, I had tons of the stuff at the end, but to start with, it's a little bit scarce. To be honest, I kind of prefer the old vanilla way of producing sulfuric acid, because you just produce everything into petroleum and then just make it as you want. But with the bobs, I think it changes it, and you have to pick some of the oil processing to create sulfur, and then you change that into sulfuric acid, which does kind of mess with the ratios a little bit, in my opinion. But to be honest, I haven't played with it enough to comment on that confidently. But with the vanilla method, you do have all that sulfur to pass through on the belt, which does take a lot of throughput. I run out of underground belts there and just don't bother. I just stick belt across and I'll deal with that later on, which is solely down to my lack of iron, which is a bit of a problem. I've already mentioned that though. So I come and look to where the next line on the main bus is, and this is starting in the next row of products. It's all looking a bit patchy now, but there's space for 4 iron belts, potentially 5 or 6, and again 4 copper belts, and however many iron we stick in, it could be 5 or 6. I think we're going to go for 5 iron, 5 copper, although I might do 4 copper and 6 iron because of how much iron Research Revolution uses. So we come in to upgrade the oil processing to the advanced version because it's more efficient. But it does require purified water, which is being produced here. And I decide to shift one of the refineries over to the standard 3 liquids method rather than the sulfur one, because I do realise we actually have enough sulfur, despite what I've just said, and no petroleum. But the lack of petroleum is down to the fact that heavy oil is topped out, which we'll sort out in a minute. I just come up to get a bit more resource to build a few more chemical plants, and I hoover anything off left on the belt to get what I can. We are going to do a little bit of research, and then I cut off any iron to the research to let that buffer on the belt a bit. So we start looking at getting the various levels of cracking done. I need a couple of engines so I can put in a circuit condition to make sure there's always a little bit of heavy oil available for lube production. So I put in a filter to essentially say only function if there is 100 or more in the storage. Or is it more than 100? I don't think it includes 100. So yeah, there'll always be a bit of heavy oil available for lube production. And we also do the same on light, so that this system shouldn't jam, but I think there's always a small chance of this jamming. Yeah, we get the purified water passed down for the cracking, and we make it available for each layer. And the circuit condition looks like it's working okay, so that's fine. We then hook that up to the light oil, which gets far more cracking plants. I think it's 7 of these to the ratio of the one heavy cracker. And I think that ties in with 5 refineries, even though I've only got 4. But we do have the sulfur refineries also in there. So I may have to look up a better ratio for this area when I come to extend it, because later on when we need a lot more plastic, this will need expanding quite significantly. But this has the entire southeast area all to itself, so this can expand as large as it wants to be. I always give the oil processing area its own complete sort of bit, because, you know, it's still a little bit of an unknown for me. It's the bit I've always struggled with the most, just because pipes get so messy. But so long as we're getting enough plastic, and so long as this area is out of sight, I don't have to look at it. But yeah, so I noticed that I've kind of broken the system. I forgot to remove the piping when I changed the refinery over to the standard 3 liquids method rather than these sulfur ones at the end. So I have to disconnect everything with light oil in it. There is one method of pumping everything to avoid until you've cleaned it all out, but I thought this is just a little bit quicker and less fiddly in some regards, and I come along and get that all connected up correctly. So I check why we're not getting any water coming through. It's most likely either me driving into the pipes or the biters have killed it at some point, and I've just not realised to replace it. So we get that fixed, and all the refineries are currently running. And we just check over our circuit conditions to make sure everything's happy. And I look at placing a barreler, or whatever it's called, a barreling pump to barrel up the lube, because I don't really see it worth piping it over. I like to keep the bus clear of pipes. I'm sure I've mentioned that before. And, you know, a barrel carries a fairly decent capacity, so the bots can carry the lube over once they're up and running. But I will have to do it manually at the start just to purge the system. So I was struggling to look for the car just then while I was looking, and I realised it's just there. It did take me a little while in normal speed to find it, and it wasn't so bad at accelerated speed. But now we've got a tiny bit of iron built up on the bus. Now I've disconnected the research, but we need to research the barreling. I did research the wrong kind of barreling before this. I researched the Angel's Ores one and got a bit confused because there was no barreling recipe in for the lube, which is why I left that unfinished, because I got a bit confused. There was no recipe to barrel up lube, and then I'd realised that I'd picked up the Angel Ores one. So while we wait for that, I get a couple of things done on the bus that I would like done before we create the bot production area, because the bots will be done using requester chests. I know it's a bit lazy, but, you know, with the Bob's Mods ones, there's so many various resources needed that I just like doing it with bots and not off the bus, because it can get a bit messy. So one of the things we need is automated belt production, because I just keep running out belts all the time. It's getting very annoying. But this is kind of a bit crazy to build with such lack amount of ore, because this uses, not ore, iron, such a short amount of iron. Well, I guess that is down to a lack of ore, just certain kinds of ores. But yeah, this is going to consume a huge amount of iron, so I don't set the system up fully. I just set the bare minimum for it, but it has the layout that I usually do with a lot of cog production, and have it so that it can at least chest up some belts for me. But yeah, there's a couple of other things that I forget in this hour's worth of gameplay to put before the bot area, the bot production area, where essentially everything is going to be created for me. So I'll be able to request anything essentially, or stuff will be produced when I just place out blueprints, like the ore sorting area. I want that to be able to just place that blueprint, not have any of the items on me personally, and just have the factory produce it and send it over when it's ready, which is very handy for a lot of things. But yeah, one thing I forget that I should have placed after the electronic engine production, or it could be after the belts before the electronic engine, it doesn't really matter, is essentially another kind of sub bus. It's a bus where you take iron, steel, brass, anything that needs pipes, bearings, or cogs. I create like a bus with 2 of each resource, so it is fairly sizable, but it'll include things later on like I can't remember the names of them, but the titanium, stuff like titanium. So 2 belts of each resource to make cogs, bearings, all those kind of things, because they use a large amount of resource, and it seems crazy to have bots carry that over for cogs to be produced. And they essentially put those various items into the logistics network. Yeah, the bots then have to carry that item, but it at least takes out that aspect of it. You know, it doesn't have to carry the resource for the cogs to then be produced. It just puts it all in the network, rather than have an assembler anywhere in the automated production area have gear wheels produced and passed into it. The bots just have to then pick up the gear or the bearing or whatever once it's been produced on that subbus. So I'll probably stick that in either at the start of the next episode or whatever, I don't know. I need to go and count how many belts I need to leave space for how many resources there are, because I can't remember off the top of my head. But it'll be stuff like titanium and anything that has pipes, bearings, cogs, anything like that. But you get the picture. So I go and steal some gear wheels from the belt production bit, because iron is just so scarce. That really needs sorting out. I'll probably do that next episode, try and work out what I'm going to do. But yeah, another problem is now I've dismantled that old ore sorting area, I'll need to clear those warehouses that have several thousand pieces of copper ore and crushed stone and all that kind of stuff. That all needs sorting out still, but it's, you know, it's boring. It's not my priority. But we do have the next level of power poles now, which is handy. I cut off the iron there to the belt production because it's just swallowing everything, and I want to get the at least a few electronic engines produced. I start to rush things at the end of this episode because I want to get bots in the air. I want to get bots in the air by the end of this episode. And that's Mark II bots as well. We're not going with Mark 1 straight away. We're skipping to Mark II, hence why we've been doing all this alumina and brass production. But we're almost there. We're getting very close. We get the resources we need in for electronic engines, which I'm sure used to use batteries. I don't know now if that's just the flying robot frames, but I'm sure electronic engines used to use batteries, but I don't know. Now we have the research for it. We can barrel up a little bit of lube. So I give it some barrels. I put a limiter on because we don't need too much barreled up, and I manually bring them over. But this will be a job for the bots very soon. We get that placed out. So those chests there for the barreling machines are essentially going to be requester chests for barrels, or for the lube, depends on what's giving and receiving, and a active provider chest for the empty barrels, again depending on which side of it is. But if you leave in a passive provider, it doesn't empty out unless you've got just the right amount of barrels in your logistics system. If it's an active one, the bots will immediately take it away once the barrel is done with it. And then for my barrel production, I'll say I only ever produce barrels if there's less than this number in the logistics system. So it's never producing too many barrels. It's only ever producing them when they're needed. And I use that a lot in my logistics system. I quite like it. It's something I've done more recently. I used to just put a limit on the passive provider chest and have everything sit in passive provider chests across the factory. But I've started using active provider chests and then a filter condition to say this inserter arm isn't able to output this product unless there's less than this number in the system. It'll then produce that product and it'll put it in an active provider chest, and then I'll have one central storage area where everything is stored. So if I come back on a train and I want stuff, I generally put that logistic storage right next to the station, and it's right there for the bots to pass straight to me, rather than them having to go off and get it from the passive provider chest. The only downside is if you're at the complete opposite end of the factory from the logistics storage area, bots are having to carry it all the way to the logistics storage, and then when you request it, it has to carry it all the way back again. But I don't want logistics storage areas to be in more than one place. So we start laying out the assemblers for the level 1 bots. They don't quite fit how I like it with the level 1, what are they called? Substations. The level 1 substations. There's a certain level of substations where 2 rows of assembly machines placed out in this way fit really nicely. But yeah, we don't have the requester chests yet, so I place logistic chests just to mark out where they're going to be. And I manually feed these machines to begin with, just because I want bots in the air by the end of this episode. I don't want to start doing it next episode. I may tidy it up a little bit, but currently we are researching logistics chests or logistics system. But I have cut off the iron to the science, so I'm going to have to look at reconnecting that once we've got a few electronic engines in that chest. As long as there's enough bots dumped in the system at the end of this episode, there should be enough for them to keep recreating themselves once I've connected the various resources to the network, which is basically what I'm doing now. I'm just going around crudely grabbing the resources that I need for bot production. It certainly isn't going to be where the resources are coming from, especially the basic electronic component chest I just placed, taking directly out the assembler. That's not very good at all. And that's reminded me, and another little sub-bus bit I do electronic components and transistors to feed directly into logistics chest to feed the system, but I don't know, might do it differently this time, but certainly not getting bots to create those, because that would be a little bit crazy. I guess that's one benefit of busing in bot production, is the throughput is a lot better, and you're not throwing all that power into having bots carry around all these items. So gonna have to work out what I'm gonna do there. So come and grab a bit more resources to manually feed the bot production, because I'm just so determined to get bots in the air this episode. At some point I look at producing some roboports, because I want to get them in the air. I'm gonna need roboports. We start laying out the Mark II bot production area. So once this is up and running, automatically I'll have them take the finished bots to a requested chest at the first roboport with a circuit condition to say only insert these bots if the number of available logistics or construction robots goes below whatever number I decide. And I'll also have an inserter arm on the bot production to say only function if there's less than this number of bots in the system. So they won't even build up there. It'll be producing the minimum required, and when we start to get to a point where we've got more bots than the ones we're using, it'll stop producing them. So we'll only ever produce enough bots for what we need. And to begin with, that will slow things down a little bit, but it'll be a bit more efficient on resources, which is what we really need. So yeah, next couple of episodes I really need to come up with a plan to sort out these lack of resources, because it is absolutely crippling at the moment. There's not really much I can do, and to obtain those extra resources I need resources, so I'm going to need to probably allow the iron to buffer up a little bit, set up some bots producing some turrets and stuff, which I have got quite a few in my storage chest. Not on me at the moment, and we're going to have to go on a massive rampage up to the north to acquire the sapphirite and put in enough defences to defend it, because it's going to create a large cloud of pollution. So yeah, we get those assemblers running, and we get the first ever RoboPort placed. One of the reasons I space each line on this bus out is so a RoboPort can be placed all the way down, which is a nice way to plan in for RoboPorts. And then your RoboPort network sort of follows that spacing. I'm not too anal about placing them out, because in Bob's you get all the extra charging pads and extenders. But that's going to be all we have time for. We do finally get some Mark II bots in the air. Just repairing some turrets there just to give them a purpose. We need a few more RoboPorts and requester chests to have them passing around. But I do hope you have enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.